Anna, thanks a lot for having me today and for having the opportunity today to speak to you. Thanks for joining. For everybody, I see and hear a lot of people, old and new friends. I see here, so it's really a pleasure to be today and being able to speak to you. As Anna already introduced me, I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm on this job of counseling in particular founders and their company for over 15 years now here in Germany. My firm Icadia, which I set up 5 years ago, is located here in Berlin, and this is also where we mostly have our focus because we are Berlin based, and most of our clients, which are founders and their growing companies, are also located in Berlin. But we have our clients throughout Germany. But as you know, Anna, the Berlin startup scene is very vibrant, and there's a lot of things moving and going on. So we are here in Berlin on the right spot, let's say. In my you highlighted indeed that there is this article out and the news is out that I and my firm we counseled last year's exit of Gorilla, and we were the counsel to the Gorilla's founders. And this definitely this was a highlight of last year, and I can't speak about any particular details because that definitely is confidential. But as this news is out, I can in general speak about, and as it also for me personally, this was really a highlight because it's a very a prominent exit, and an exit as per se is a very interesting thing to counsel and to be part of it, at least from my perspective, and giving input on a legal side. But in some ways, this work we have done with Gorillas and their founders is kind of an example of what we do for a lot of other founders and companies. It might be on other scales, and which you already said when you introduced me, that we are also counsels to founders when they're setting up their company, or we are accompanying them when they have their first pre-seed round. So not talking about numbers that might be totally different than a big exit with quite a big amount of euros in the news. But on the same side, it's a lot of things are similar in that regard. And also another point, which here for micropreneur is also something I want to highlight or underline today, that this company Gorillas, it was set up by Kagan and Ugur, which I came to know very early and already years ago through other ventures at the end of the day. But this is kind of a very general topic that a lot of people which are non-German or non-German speaking are setting up companies here in Germany or in Berlin, and are doing really great things. And this is also when we first met, Anna, I told you that nearly 2/3 of my clients are non-German speaking people, and they come from within the EU, but also from outside of the EU, and really from nearly every country in the world we have clients, because a lot of people, a lot of migrants, as to say, they're coming here to Germany to start their own thing, to build companies. And I'm very happy to work with young founders and these kind of founders, and to help start them their company. And let's say from a range, what our firm is providing, it's legal service. I'm personally I'm focused on financing rounds, on negotiations with investors, And definitely this is something that goes really from pre-seed rounds, or I've seen here in the chat some question about convertible loans, includes also convertible loans, and it goes over various stages of financing rounds until, let's say, cashing out the founders when there is in a growth company, when it's let's say a successful exit. Because a lot of companies actually, which I'm counseling, or I'm lawyer to the founders or to the company, they are headed, let's say, generally towards an exit, because that still is a lot of times the overall goal of a lot of founders. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't need to be. There is the variety is very broad. You know it by yourself, Anna. I'm talking to you now, because with Micropreneur you also you have created a non-profit organization, and so let's say this is the goal of a founder could be that there could be many aspects of what a founder wants to establish or wants to head to with the entity, with the company that such founder is establishing here. So it's not necessarily the exit focus that a founder has to have. There could be a lot of different aspects too.
Well, Ingo, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that a lot of people have questions, but what I would do, and this is part of our format of these events, I will start initiating the conversation and asking questions, and I'm sure that a lot of topics will be spot on, and later on I would let people to start asking questions as well. If you have to leave, you can write the question on the chat, and we can ask the question. And as I said, we're recording this and we're going to be uploading this later on, and we will share it among the community as well, and all our social media channels as well. So, Ingo, you were mentioning something very important, which is basically what you do, and the reason why many of us are in this event at this point is essentially because you focus on the financial rounds. And we know that mainly startups are the ones who have the whole investment topic in their forehead even before they create a company. One of the first questions that we received at Micropreneur is, where do we find investors? And this is the typical question that we receive in very, very early stages. So from your background, and with this, I'm trying to bring information to the basic, and later on we will tap into millions and exits. But what is the first thing that a new founder, especially a startup founder, needs to know when you are just registering your company and you immediately want to raise funds? Essentially, because the reason why I mentioned gorillas, and I don't want this to be the only topic, but it set an example of within the startup ecosystem, which is really rare, which is a rapid growth, a rapid sales, and a rapid exit. This is something that happens, and it's very rare. With this, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it's not, and it should not be what drives every startup to do, because a lot of mistakes can be committed, and we don't all have Ingo as a lawyer behind us to try to fix all these mistakes. So what is the first thing that you would recommend to a founder who just started and who is immediately thinking in raising funds?
Okay,
from a legal perspective, of course.
Let's say tough question at the beginning. Let's say there are various points to consider. First of all, what I learned, and I'm working on a legal side of the deal, so and definitely I'm part of quite a lot of those negotiations, but still. One point which is essential is that you have the connection to investors, and you talk to them very soon. You can't expect that you get an investment immediately, because also, even if, let's say, everything is on the go with you, your company, your team, and let's say your vision, your product or your service, even if everything is a perfect fit for an investor, typically these decisions are not taken that swiftly. That depends on the investor. Typically when you approach angel investors, as they are investing their own money, they can decide rather quickly. But still, these persons don't decide, from 1 hour to the other. So you have to expect that this is a process with back and forth, with Q&As, another Q&As, and also with really drawbacks that you will encounter. And you have to expect, and you have to calculate a reasonable amount of time to that. Some startups, which are, let's say, fortunate and probably which are already set up by experienced founders, they could already be set up together with investors. That is possible, that you, even before you set up a company, that you say, okay, this is my new project. The team behind me is ready, and you already have, you can make use of your connections and set the company up with investors. This definitely is the best way, but this is an exception as well. Typically, this is not happening because typically it's one founder, or probably even better, a team of founders, because some investors want to see a team that they are investing in, not a single standalone founder. So best of is a team, and then you try to convince investors. Here, as said, angel investor is probably far more, it's faster than institutional investors. Institutional investors, you have to see that even if they are very hands-on and very pragmatic, and this is what I experienced nearly with all of the investors in venture capital, that they are typically fast deciding, that they are typically very pragmatic, and that you can work quite reasonably with a lot of them, let's say. But still, even if they are very pragmatic, they have internal systems which they have to stick to, meaning they have to have a kind of resolutions within their partnership, so that the investment in a special startup is green-lighted from their side, and even that takes time. The legal process takes time of getting together a financing round. You can think of lead investor, co-investors, you can think of shareholders that you already have in the company. And because of that German system of notarization, when you have a capital increase, and by way of capital increase, you issue new shares to the investor, this will take time. So this is, I see typically one of the big things that you have to keep in mind. The other is probably that you have to select your investors. So meaning, what do I mean by that? Your vision is founded in certain products or services, and not all investors are investing in these kinds of projects, products, or services. So this is very important for you, that, for example, if you have an idea in decarbonization, you probably should approach kind of impact investors, but probably not investors which are known for investing into, let's say, B2C marketplaces. And so you have to do some research on which is an investor which fits your product, your service that you want to bring with your company.
With this, Ingo, because now you're heading towards a couple of things that I wanted to break down. First and foremost, how does a financial round looks like from a legal perspective? What kind of documents, what kind of things founders needs to get ready, and when is the right moment? When typically you think that it's not too late to look for a lawyer that goes through and with you through this financial round?
As a lawyer, I have to say that you should contact a lawyer always first, but that's just to say. How starting with what are, let's say, the concept of a financing round, starting with that and basic documents for that. And I don't want to go into detail, but just to put in a nutshell, what it is you create new shares. I think this sometimes is kind of a misunderstanding, especially with young founders, young entrepreneurs. It's not that you are selling your shares to an investor. This is typically not the case. This is what, let's say, legally, technically, I would say this is a secondary, and we can talk later about that. But the typical pre-seed round or seed round, Series A round, is that the capital in the company will be increased. Let's say if you have a GmbH with 25,000 shares, you issue, for example, 5,000 new shares. So from 25,000, you have a new share capital then of 30,000 euros. And those 5,000 new shares, they will belong in the end to your investor or to the group of investors, let's say. That could be co-investor, lead investor, and so on. This is the basic concept. So you create new shares in your GmbH or in your UG. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Or it could also be in a stock corporation, but I don't think we talk here today about stock corporations. So it's your UG that issues new shares to your investor. The investor subscribes to this share, and by that, the investor subscribes to the share, gets the share, and in return has to invest an amount of money. This amount of money is the result of the negotiation you had with that investor. That could be 10 euros, it could be 10,000 euros, or it could be 10 million euros as investment. That it depends on the valuation of the company, and let's say on certain metrics that how you came to that valuation and how you could maybe defend that valuation when you negotiated the valuation with the investor. And this is, let's say, the general concept. Documentation-wise, there is a capital increase that has to be notarized, and this is done by a notary. And typically, you see that you have an investment and a shareholders agreement. This is not necessary, but this is a very typical market standard that you even see when there is angel rounds, let's say pre-seed or pre-seed rounds happening. Then typical and experienced angels also want to see shareholders agreement and investment agreement, which basically is kind of sets the rules of the future collaboration, let's say, or of the future relationship, legal relationship between the parties. That includes information rights, that could include special rights like liquidation preferences and anti-dilution clauses, which we might talk later, but which is already quite some detailed things, but which also includes things like, when does the investor have to pay? Does he have to pay in 10 days or in 20 days? And in return, what does the startup has to do? Like I said already, information rights, or is there other special rights that the startup has to grant to the investor? And this is notarized, and this is what we then see in the news as financing rounds, Series A, Series B, whatever.
How long does it take usually? I mean, I know that it depends as well also on the investor, but typically, how long does it take this financial round from the moment that the investor says yes and the signature and the notarization of this?
I would say typically or roughly it will be 2 months, let's say. Once there is, and coming back to your question, when to approach a lawyer, I think best or when it really makes sense for a company to approach a lawyer is when there is a term sheet on the table. A term sheet is kind of a document in which the cornerstones of the investments are summarized. Term sheets typically are 1-pagers, might be 3 pages. In some cases, you also see more elaborated ones, which are longer, but typically it's a very short document, and which in turn means if you approach with a term sheet an experienced lawyer, which knows what he or she does, then typically a lawyer can go through that in less than an hour, or let's say in an hour's time. So meaning with very few work that you have to pay for, the impact could be rather big, because the term sheet includes definitely things that you are totally aware of, like investment amounts, valuations, milestones, or these kind of things that you negotiated and you are really master of. But also then typically term sheets include kind of, let's say, more legal language, like these things like anti-dilution or liquidation preference, which typically, or in particular young founders, are not that aware of, and which still can have quite a heavy economic impact on the investment. And here I think it really makes sense that this is the starting point, that the young founder or young company is collaborating with a lawyer, because here, starting with that signature on the term sheet, then it's really this maybe 2-month time period in which the documents are prepared, in which maybe due diligence is still ongoing, so there is still input from this side of the deal. Until then, really all people are in line and are standing before the notary and ready to sign.
This is the typical question that we also receive, Ingo, because everyone is terrified, especially in Germany, of how slow notaries are. And that's why I keep saying, please get the lawyer before and when you have the investor, because that could help a little bit. And so you don't have to go to the notary alone. And with that, I have another question, which is based on a case that we had on our 911 Bureau Crazy. A young founder closed a round, and I guess that lack of understanding what financial round means led to what I'm going to tell. And you can provide an example of what to do in these cases, because it happens. They sign up for a term sheet with the investor for X amount of money, and the investment was quite big, was Series A, and there were milestones already precede what needed to be done in order to keep on the company, and that included employment and included bringing staff members. The investor didn't pay in time. The investor paid way too ahead, and let's say it took months for the investor to pay. What to do in these cases, and what is exactly what protects the founder before signing up the term sheet and also going to the notary, especially if this investor is not based in the same country? What protects a founder, and what could be the potential threats for these founders when it comes to negotiating with investors, which is not in the region, not in Germany, for example, comes from the United States, and payments don't go through that fast?
Okay, let me answer first very generally, and then maybe take a very quick but detailed look in what could have been done there. In general, I don't see a lot of these cases, even if you have investors from all over the world who are investing in German companies. Actually, in my experience, and it's maybe I'm lucky there, but I did not experience such really let's say bad behavior, or might be other reasons behind the case you told us. Because typically when also the investor, when being from abroad, has to provide certain effort to have this financing round done. This is typically he's conducting a due diligence, meaning that he spends time and maybe even money on checking your startup, or the contracts that you have, the technology that you are building or that you're already in possession of. Then on the legal side, he's working typically on power of attorneys, because typically no investor from abroad is taking a plane or a trip to a German notary just for the financing rounds.
Mhm.
So typically this is all done by power of attorneys. A lot of times also foreign investors are counseled by their lawyers, so typically they are also incurring their costs, and by that all, and maybe this is one of the first points here. You see how your investor is really into the investment in your company. If he lacks certain of these things, then typically, or if he wants to avoid these costs, then that might be already a red flag. Even if and especially when you said that we are talking already about a Series A, so meaning quite a reasonable investment, that maybe should also be already be seen as a red flag if an investor is not doing these efforts and just, let's say, telling you that he's investing. In coming to more detail, and starting with a term sheet, you before doing that, you should do your own research on your investor, meaning typically experienced investors, they have more than one investment done already, so they have portfolio. Typically, they are not keeping the portfolio to themselves, meaning they tell you about portfolio companies, and typically you can also reach out to them. So asking previous investment of these investments, how it was, how the investor is acting after the investment, or which let's say advantages they received in addition from this investor. This is a typical behavior, and in particular the big ones, they have no problem with sharing some contact points where you can ask founders that were maybe 1 year or 2 years in the same situation as you are, and you can speak with them. So you can do your own due diligence on the investor. But definitely there is also a lot of new investors, and which is also a good sign. There's a lot of very small venture capital funds available, which might not have been done so many investments already, but still you can hear around, because also typically the people in these new funds, they don't emerge from zero. Typically they worked at bigger VCs, or they were founders themselves, which were very successful and then started their own fund. This is a typical, let's say, path, I would say, that venture capital investors are going. So you can check on them. And if you don't hear and see anything, that might be already a strange sign. Could be that this is some guy setting up his first fund, and which was not in the industry involved before. But typically all those people have kind of relationship to the investment scene before.
Mm-hmm. I want to move very quickly to Q&As from the audience. And again, I want this to be a bit more broad, essentially, because this is not just a one-on-one consultation, and case by case, of course, could be different. But one thing, and especially when it comes to the whole financial round, which is a lot of work from everyone involved, not just from selecting the investor, which is a lot of work involved in that part as well, but also regarding the shareholders. Shareholders are not necessarily the co-founders, but also the co-founders are the ones who had the duty essentially to come together and have agreements previously. And from a legal perspective, Ingo, what would you suggest? Because this happens a lot in the startup ecosystem, essentially, that typically, I mean, we have two cases. We have several people coming together as co-founders, build a product, and they move forward. But another typical case that happens a lot, and especially in incubators, that they match co-founders, usually is one solo founder driving the whole vision and the company, and then co-founders are onboarded on its way. And all these things, of course, happened sometimes before financial rounds or in the financial rounds. And there are share cap agreements among potential co-founders and other shareholders. What is the, let's say, the most legal, the legal advice in this matter, especially for those who are onboarding co-founders, essentially to go and look for investment together? What are the typical documents before or just going to the notary and share the shares? What is the typical advice on this end? Because at the end of the day, once you sign, once you go to the notary, once you change your status, going back, it's very, very hard, and a lot of fights could initiate from there. So what is your advice, especially for young founders who are in this process, even before thinking on the financial round?
Yeah. Probably the most important thing here is that once you agreed on the share split, which is a problem and a pitfall of itself, and a very important topic, but once you, let's say, assuming you agreed on the share split, I think the most important tool that you should include when you set up the company is a vesting scheme, meaning that for a typical, let's say, three-person founding team, that the vesting will prevent that if one of those founders is dropping out because of whatever reason, could be good reasons, could be bad reasons, for whatever reason, that once one of the founder, let's say, leaves the team, that the team has still the link to the share of this person, so that they could get hold on the shares from this person to be able to onboard a new co-founder. Because I've seen a lot of times that, in particular in the very early stages of companies, when pressure is high, a lot of work, but no money, or very, very limited money available, the pressure sometimes is so high that people just can't stand the pressure and say, okay, I'm leaving the team, I'm going out, doing whatever other things. And if the company has already been set up in such scenario without any provisions, without a vesting scheme, this person who leaves the team just would retain the shares that was dedicated to that person. And then if you don't have any legal instrument, you at the end you have to convince that person to give back the shares. And that might be possible in a way when there was no fight and that person left on good terms, and that person is still, let's say, available for that transferring back of the shares to the team. So but all of these things, they might not be true. There could be a fight, you don't speak to each other, these things happen a lot, or that person just is not available anymore to sign any paper because of a bad accident, or because that person is, let's say, is back in the country of origin, and let's say not available. So there is a lot of possibilities, and then you don't get that signature on the paper from that person. And by that, typically the company is dead, because think of an equal split between three founders. Each one has a third of the company. In such scenario, it would mean that 1/3 of the company is just gone, and you will never be able to get investment on board, because every investor looks in your cap table, meaning in the share split, and then he sees, okay, there are 2 active founders, and then there's this third founder who's just gone. And that's so this company would be not investable anymore. And that's also when in the chat here before, somebody wrote pitfalls to avoid. I would say this is one really big pitfall that could destroy the company from the very beginning if you don't have a vesting scheme, which means that you don't have any possibility, if one of the founders leaves, that you get back the shares from that founder.
Absolutely. Well, now I want to leave the participants to ask questions. We only have 50 minutes to be conscious of our time, because it's just a lunch break, and it's a lunch break with Ingo this time. There are many more questions and many things that I want to ask, but I want to let people to do it. And for now, I'm going to stop recording. And for those who didn't attend, stay tuned, because this is the type of information and conversations we have with experts. But thank you so much, Ingo. For now, I will stop the recording, and so people can feel safe of asking their questions without committing anybody. Thank you so much.